The scratching sound stopped the moment my hand touched the closet door handle. Complete silence. The kind of silence that feels alive, waiting, holding its breath. I stood in my parents' bedroom, my phone in my other hand with 911 typed but not yet called, and every instinct in my body was screaming at me to leave, to run, to get out of this house and let someone else discover whatever was making that sound. But these were my parents. This was their house. And they had not answered my calls in 8 days. The bedroom looked like a crime scene. Furniture overturned. Lamp shattered on the floor. Dark stains on the carpet that my mind did not want to identify. Scratch marks on the walls. Deep gouges in the paint that looked like someone had clawed at them with inhuman desperation. And from inside that closet, just 30 seconds ago, I had heard scratching. Slow, deliberate scratching like fingernails dragging across wood. I took a breath and opened the door. What I found inside that closet would force me to re-examine every assumption I had ever made about my parents, my childhood, and the carefully constructed lies that families tell themselves to avoid facing unbearable truths. But to understand why I was standing in that destroyed bedroom, why my parents had stopped answering their phones, why everything I thought I knew about my family was about to shatter, I need to take you back 8 days. Back to when I thought my parents were just ordinary people living an ordinary retired life. My name is Daniel Cooper. I am 31 years old, and I work as an EMT in Denver, Colorado. My parents, Michael and Sarah Cooper, live about 3 hours away in a small town called Silverton, where they moved 5 years ago after my father retired from his job as a mechanical engineer. They bought a modest house at the edge of town, spent their days gardening and hiking and living the quiet life that people work toward their whole lives. Or at least that is what I thought they were doing. I talked to my parents every Sunday. It was our routine, had been for years. Every Sunday evening around 7, my phone would ring, and it would be my mother calling to check in, to hear about my week, to tell me about their garden or their latest hiking trip or whatever book my father was reading. When the call did not come that first Sunday 8 days ago, I assumed they had just forgotten or gotten busy with something. I sent a text, "Hey, missed your call. Everything okay?" No response. Monday morning, I tried calling. Straight to voicemail on both their phones. I left messages asking them to call me back, saying I was starting to worry. Tuesday, still nothing. I called their landline, which they kept for emergencies even though hardly anyone used landlines anymore. It rang and rang with no answer. By Wednesday, I was genuinely concerned. I called their neighbors, an older couple named the Hendersons who lived next door. Mrs. Henderson answered on the third ring. "Oh, Daniel, how nice to hear from you. How are you doing, dear?" "I am okay, Mrs. Henderson. I am actually calling because I have not been able to reach my parents for a few days. Have you seen them around?" There was a pause. "You know, now that you mention it, I have not seen their car in the driveway for about a week. I assumed they had gone on a trip. Your father mentioned something about wanting to visit some national parks before the weather got too cold. Did they tell you they were leaving?" "No, but they do not always mention it. We are neighbors, not babysitters." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "I am sure they are fine, dear. Probably just forgot to mention their trip to you." But my parents would not forget to mention a week-long trip. They would not leave without telling me. And they definitely would not ignore my calls and texts for days. Thursday, I called the Silverton Police Department. A board-sounding officer named Martinez took my information and said they would do a welfare check. "We will send someone by the house, make sure everything looks okay. But I have to tell you, 9 times out of 10 in these situations, the folks have just gone on vacation and forgotten to tell anyone." My parents would not do that. You would be surprised how often people say that, and then we find out the parents are in Vegas or on a cruise ship. "We will check it out and call you back." They called me back 3 hours later. We sent an officer to the address. The house is locked up, lights are off, no signs of disturbance. The neighbors confirmed they have not seen your parents in about a week. There is no evidence of foul play or emergency. Looks like they probably went on a trip. But their phones go straight to voicemail. Both of them. Maybe they are somewhere without cell service. Mountains, rural areas, plenty of dead zones around here. Can you go inside the house? Make sure they are not hurt in there or something. Not without probable cause or permission from the homeowners. The house is locked. There is no sign of forced entry. No indication that anyone is in distress. We cannot just break into someone's home because their adult son has not heard from them in a few days. I wanted to argue, to demand they take this seriously, but I knew how it sounded. Adult son worried because his parents did not call for a week. They probably dealt with overreactive children all the time, but I knew something was wrong. I could feel it in my gut, that instinct you develop as an EMT when a situation is not quite right even if you cannot articulate why. Friday, I took the day off work and made the 3-hour drive to Silverton. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I would probably arrive to find a note on the door saying they had gone to visit my aunt in California and their phones had died. I would feel stupid for worrying, and my mother would laugh about her overprotective son who drove 3 hours because they missed one Sunday call. But when I pulled up to their house just after noon, I knew immediately that something was very wrong. The front door was not locked. It was not even fully closed. It stood about 6 inches ajar, swaying slightly in the wind that came down from the mountains. My parents never left their door unlocked, let alone open. Never. I got out of my car slowly, my EMT training kicking in automatically. Assess the situation. Look for dangers. Do not rush into an unknown scenario. The yard looked normal. The garden my mother loved showed signs of neglect. Weeds starting to overtake the vegetables, but nothing alarming. The mailbox was overflowing with mail that no one had collected. I approached the front door and pushed it open wider, calling out as I did. "Mom? Dad? It is Daniel. Are you here?" No response. Just the sound of wind moving through the house, carrying with it a smell that made my stomach turn. Not quite decay, but something organic and wrong, like spoiled food mixed with something else I could not identify. I stepped inside, and my heart sank. The living room looked like a tornado had torn through it. The couch was overturned. The coffee table was shattered, glass scattered across the carpet. Family photos that usually lined the mantel were on the floor, frames broken, glass crunching under my feet as I moved further into the house. I stood there for a moment trying to make sense of what I was seeing. This was not a normal break-in. Burglars do not overturn furniture and leave electronics sitting on the shelf. They do not break picture frames and scatter family photos. They take what they want and leave. This was something else. Something that spoke of chaos and violence and desperate struggle. I moved through the living room carefully, my EMT training kicking in to assess the scene like I would assess an accident site. Looking for clues about what happened, about whether anyone was hurt, about what kind of danger might still be present. The kitchen was worse. Cabinet doors hung open, dishes broken on the floor. The refrigerator door was ajar, and the smell of spoiled food mixed with something else made me gag. Food had been pulled out and left to rot, like someone had been looking for something but had not cared about the mess they were making. There was a chair overturned by the back door. Dark stains on the linoleum that looked like dried blood. Scratch marks on the doorframe itself, like someone had been clawing at it, trying to get out or keep something out. I could not tell which. But it was not just destruction. It was something else. Something that made my EMT instincts scream that this was not a simple break-in or even a simple assault. There were scratch marks on the walls. Deep, desperate gouges in the drywall. Some of them in patterns that looked almost like words but were too chaotic to read. There were dark stains on the carpet that I tried not to think too hard about. And there were Drawings? No, not drawings. Scratch marks arranged in shapes. Circles and lines and symbols that did not make any sense. In the hallway leading to the stairs, I found medication bottles scattered on the floor. I picked one up and read the label. Prescribed to Michael Cooper. The name of the medication meant nothing to me, but I took a photo of it with my phone, thinking it might be important later. As I moved toward the stairs, I noticed more details that painted a picture of something terrible. Blankets piled in corners, like someone had been sleeping on the floor instead of in a bed. Empty water bottles scattered everywhere. Food wrappers from meals eaten hastily, desperately, without any care for cleanup or normalcy. Whatever had happened here had been going on for days, maybe longer. I pulled out my phone to call 911, and that is when I heard it. A sound from upstairs. Slow, rhythmic scratching like something was dragging across wood. Every horror movie I had ever seen told me to leave, to call the police from outside, to let professionals handle whatever was up there. But these were my parents. If they were hurt, if they were in trouble, every second could matter. I moved toward the stairs, my phone in one hand, ready to dial 911 the moment I saw anything that required immediate help. The scratching sound continued, regular and persistent, coming from what I knew was my parents' bedroom. The upstairs hallway was dark. All the curtains were drawn, blocking out the afternoon sun. More scratch marks on the walls, more dark stains on the carpet. The door to my parents' bedroom stood open, and I could see the chaos inside even from the hallway. The scratching stopped as I approached. Complete silence. Waiting silence. I stepped into the bedroom and my breath caught. The destruction here was even worse than downstairs. The bed frame was broken, mattress partially off the frame. The mirror on the dresser was shattered. Clothes were pulled from the drawers and scattered across the floor. And the closet door was closed, which would have been normal except that my parents never closed their closet door. My mother had a thing about air circulation, about preventing musty smells, and that closet door was always propped open. I heard it again. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Slow and deliberate, coming from inside that closet. I should have called 911 right then. Should have backed out of the house and let the police handle it. But some part of me, the part that had been trained to help people in crisis, needed to know what was in there. Needed to know if my parents were hurt and needed immediate medical attention. I walked toward the closet, my hand reaching for the door handle, and that is where I started this story. Standing in my parents' destroyed bedroom, about to open that door and discover the truth that would change everything. My fingers wrapped around the cold metal handle. The scratching had stopped, but I could sense something on the other side. Something waiting, something alive. I pulled the door open quickly, like ripping off a bandage, and looked inside. What I found was my father. He was crouched in the back corner of the closet, curled into himself, his clothes filthy and torn. His eyes were wide and wild, pupils dilated, and when he saw me, he made a sound that was not quite human. A low, guttural moan that raised every hair on my arms. For a moment, I could not process what I was seeing. This was not my father. My father was always clean-shaven and well-dressed, even in retirement. He wore button-down shirts and kept his hair neatly trimmed. He smelled like the aftershave he had used for as long as I could remember. This person crouched in the closet had a wild beard, matted and dirty. His hair was long and tangled. His clothes were torn and stained with things I did not want to identify. He smelled like sweat and fear and waste, like he had been living in this closet for days without any care for hygiene or basic human needs. But it was his eyes that destroyed me. They were my father's eyes, the same blue-gray color I saw in the mirror every morning. But there was nothing of my father in them. No recognition, no awareness, just primal fear and confusion, like an animal that had been cornered and did not understand what was happening to it. "Dad? Oh my God! Dad, are you okay?" I dropped to my knees in front of the closet, my EMT training taking over. Check for injuries. Assess level of consciousness. Look for immediate threats to life. I reached toward him slowly, the way you might approach a frightened animal, and he flinched back, making that terrible moaning sound again. His hands, which had been doing the scratching I heard, were covered in dried blood. His fingernails torn and ragged from clawing at the wooden floor of the closet. I could see injuries on his arms and legs, scratches and bruises that looked self-inflicted. His lips were cracked and bleeding, like he had not had water in days. He was shaking, trembling all over, either from fear or cold or shock. I could not tell. "Dad, it is me. It is Daniel, your son. I am here to help you. Can you understand me? Can you tell me what happened?" But my father was not responding to my voice. He was staring at me like he did not recognize me, like I was a stranger who had invaded his space. His breathing was rapid and shallow, the kind of breathing you see in panic attacks or severe trauma. He kept making that low moaning sound, and occasionally he would look past me toward the bedroom door, like he was watching for something that terrified him. I tried to do a quick physical assessment without touching him, since he clearly found touch threatening. No obvious broken bones. No signs of major bleeding. But he was clearly dehydrated, probably malnourished, and in some kind of severe psychological crisis that was beyond anything I had training to handle. "Dad, it is me. It is Daniel. Where is Mom? Is she hurt? What happened here?" He just continued to stare, that empty, terrified look in his eyes that I had seen before in patients with severe head trauma or psychological breaks. Like the person I knew had gone somewhere else and left just a shell behind. I needed to call 911 immediately, get paramedics here, get my father to a hospital, figure out what had happened to him. But before I could dial, I heard another sound. From somewhere else in the house. Footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps coming up the stairs. My mother appeared in the doorway of the bedroom, and what I saw made my professional composure completely shatter. She looked like she had not slept or eaten in days. Her clothes were stained and dirty. Her hair, which she usually kept neat and styled, was wild and matted. But it was her eyes that destroyed me. They had the same empty, terrified quality as my father's. But there was something else there too. Recognition, guilt, and something that looked almost like relief. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice hoarse and broken. "You were not supposed to come here. You were not supposed to see this. Mom, what happened? What is going on? Why is Dad in the closet? Why does the house look like this? Are you hurt?" She did not answer my questions. Instead, she slowly sank down to sit on the floor, her back against the wall, like her legs had finally given out after carrying her through something unbearable. I could see now that she had injuries too. Bruises on her arms that looked like defensive wounds. A cut on her forehead that had been crudely bandaged with what looked like a torn t-shirt. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably, and when I looked closer, I could see that her fingernails were broken and bloody too, like she had been fighting something or trying to hold on to something with desperate strength. "I tried to handle it," she said quietly, her voice so hoarse it was almost a whisper. "I tried to keep it manageable, to keep him safe, to keep everyone safe. But it got worse so fast, faster than the doctors said it would. And I did not know what to do. I did not know what to do, Daniel." The last words came out as a sob, and I watched my mother, who I had never seen cry in my entire adult life, completely fall apart. Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks, her whole body shaking with the force of emotions she had clearly been holding back for far too long. "Mom," You are not making any sense. What doctors? What got worse? Please talk to me. Let me help." She looked up at me with tears streaming down her face, and I saw in that moment that my mother, the strongest woman I had ever known, had been broken by something, crushed under a weight she had been carrying alone. And I could see in her eyes that she had been waiting for this moment, for someone to find them, for someone to take the burden from her shoulders, even though it meant admitting that she had failed at something she had promised to handle. "Your father has dementia, Daniel. Early onset Alzheimer's. We found out about a year ago, right after we moved here. That is why we moved here, actually, to a smaller town where we could have more privacy, where fewer people would notice if something was wrong." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What? No, that is not possible. I talk to him every week. He is fine. He is normal. We have been hiding it from you, from everyone. Your father made me promise not to tell you, not to tell anyone. He was so ashamed, so terrified of what people would think, of what it would mean for his independence. So we pretended everything was fine. We managed it, until we could not anymore." I looked at my father, still crouched in that closet, still staring at nothing with those empty eyes, and I felt my entire understanding of the past year reorganize itself. The phone calls that always came from my mother's phone, never his. The times when my father seemed to hand the phone to my mother quickly during our conversations. The way my mother always seemed to be the one planning things, making decisions, taking the lead in ways she had not before. "How bad is it?" I asked, though part of me did not want to know the answer. The doctor said he might have 5 years, maybe more, before it got really bad. But it has been progressing faster than they predicted. The past 6 months, he started having episodes. Moments where he did not know where he was, who I was. He would get agitated, aggressive sometimes. I tried to manage it. I researched everything, talked to specialists, got him on medications. But the medications made him worse somehow. Made the episodes more severe. She looked around at the destroyed bedroom, at the scratch marks on the walls, and her voice broke. "A week ago, he had the worst episode yet. He woke up in the middle of the night and did not know where he was. He thought our house was dangerous, that someone was trying to hurt him. He started destroying things, trying to protect himself from threats that only existed in his mind. I tried to calm him down, but he did not recognize me. He thought I was a stranger trying to hurt him. Why did you not call for help? Why did you not call me?" Because he would calm down eventually. The episodes always ended. He would exhaust himself and fall asleep, and when he woke up, he would be himself again for a while. Confused about why the house was damaged, but himself. So I would clean up and we would pretend it had not happened. We would pretend we were still normal. But this time was different? She nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. This time he did not calm down. The episode just kept going. For days, he barely slept, barely ate. He would destroy something, then hide, then come out and destroy something else. I was afraid to leave him alone even for a minute. I was afraid he would hurt himself or wander outside and get lost. So I stayed with him. I tried to keep him safe. I unplugged the phones because the ringing agitated him. I kept the doors locked so he could not get out. I tried to wait it out, to keep him safe until he came back to himself. She paused, looking down at her hands, and I could see her reliving those days. The first night, he broke the coffee table. He thought it was moving, that it was trying to attack him. He picked up the lamp and smashed it. I tried to calm him down, but he did not know who I was. He called me by names of people I have never heard of. He begged me not to hurt him. Her voice broke on those words. My own husband, begging me not to hurt him, because he could not remember that I am the person who has loved him for 41 years. The second day he stopped eating. I would put food in front of him, and he would just stare at it like he did not know what it was for. I tried to hand feed him like you would a child, and he would push me away, sometimes violently. I got this. She gestured to the cut on her forehead. When he shoved me and I fell against the corner of the dresser. By the third day, I was running on adrenaline and terror. I could not sleep because I had to watch him constantly. Could not leave to get help because I was afraid of what he would do to himself if I left. I kept telling myself that this episode would pass like the others, that he would wake up one morning and be himself again, confused about the destruction but himself. I just had to wait it out, just had to be strong enough to wait it out. But on the fourth day, I realized this was different. This was not going to pass. His mind had gone somewhere I could not reach, and I did not think it was coming back. And I knew I needed help, but I was so scared, Daniel, so terrified of what would happen if I admitted I could not handle this. If I let strangers come into our home and take him away. If I had to watch him be restrained and sedated and taken to some facility where he would die alone and confused. She looked up at me with such raw anguish in her eyes that I almost could not bear to look at her. So I kept trying. Days 5, 6, 7. Trying to get him to eat. Trying to get him to sleep. Trying to keep him from hurting himself. And the whole time I was dying inside, Daniel. Dying from exhaustion and fear and the knowledge that I was watching my husband disappear, and there was nothing I could do to bring him back. Mom, he needed to be in a hospital. He needed professional help. I know that now. I know I should have called for help days ago. But I was so scared, Daniel. Scared of what would happen if I admitted I could not handle this. Scared that they would take him away from me and put him in a facility where he would be alone and terrified and I could not protect him. Scared of what you would think when you found out we had been lying to you for a year. I wanted to be angry at her for not telling me, for not asking for help, for letting it get to this point. But looking at her sitting on that floor, clearly at the end of her strength, I could only feel overwhelming sadness for what she had been through alone. We need to call 911 right now, I said, already dialing. Dad needs to be in a hospital where they can help him, where they can figure out what is happening with his medications and get him stable. And you need to be checked out too. When was the last time you ate? Slept? I do not remember, she said vaguely. Days ago, maybe. I had to watch him constantly. Could not risk falling asleep and having him hurt himself. The 911 operator answered, and I explained the situation as calmly as I could. Dementia patient in crisis. Possible self-harm. Family member who had been acting as caregiver showing signs of extreme exhaustion and possible medical emergency herself. They dispatched paramedics and police immediately. While we waited for help to arrive, I sat on the floor between my mother and the closet where my father was still huddled. I tried to talk to him, to see if there was any recognition in his eyes, but he just continued to stare at nothing, occasionally making that low moaning sound that broke my heart. I am sorry, my mother kept saying. I am so sorry, Daniel. I should have told you. I should have asked for help. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could keep him safe and keep our dignity and keep our family together. But I could not. I failed him. You did not fail him, Mom. You have been dealing with something impossible on your own. Nobody could have managed this alone. I kept thinking if I just tried harder, if I just researched more and found the right medications and created the right environment, I could keep him home, keep him with me, keep him from having to go to a facility where he would be one more patient in a system that does not have enough time or resources to really care about individuals. I kept thinking I owed him that after 40 years of marriage. The paramedics arrived about 15 minutes later, and watching them load my father onto a gurney was one of the hardest things I have ever experienced. He fought them at first, not understanding who they were or what they were trying to do, making sounds of fear and confusion that I will never forget. They had to sedate him to get him safely into the ambulance. I stood in the driveway watching the whole thing, my professional training warring with my emotions. As an EMT, I understood exactly why they were doing what they were doing. The sedation was necessary. The restraints were for his safety and theirs. Everything was being done by the book with care and professionalism. But as a son, I was watching strangers restrain my father, watching him fight against people who were trying to help him, watching the terror in his eyes as the medication took effect and his struggles became weaker. I was watching my father, who had always been strong and capable and in control of every situation, being reduced to someone who needed to be sedated and restrained just to be moved safely. One of the paramedics, a young woman probably not much older than me, came over after they had secured my father in the ambulance. "Are you okay?" she asked, and I could see genuine concern in her eyes. "I am an EMT too," I said, and I do not know why that mattered, but it felt important to say. "I know this is necessary. I know you are doing everything right. It is just hard to watch." She nodded. "I understand. It is always harder when it is your own family. Do you want to ride with him?" I looked at the ambulance where my father was strapped to the gurney, his eyes already glazing over from the sedation, and I wanted to say yes. Wanted to be with him, to hold his hand, to whisper reassurances he would not understand but might somehow feel. But then I looked at my mother, collapsed on the lawn where the other paramedics were working on her, getting in 4 started, checking her vitals, and I knew where I needed to be. "I will go with my mother," I said. "Please take care of him. We will. I promise." My mother collapsed before they could get her to the second ambulance. Just fell over like a puppet with its strings cut, unconscious from days of stress and sleep deprivation and probably dehydration and malnutrition. They got her stabilized and loaded up too, and I watched both ambulances pull away from the house, sirens wailing, taking my parents to separate futures that neither of them had wanted. I rode with her in the ambulance, holding her hand, watching her breathe, thinking about all the phone calls over the past year where she had lied to me, where she had pretended everything was fine while she was slowly being crushed under the weight of caring for a husband who was disappearing into dementia. At the hospital, they admitted both my parents. My father was placed in the psychiatric wing for observation and medication adjustment. My mother was put on 4 fluids and kept for evaluation. The doctors told me she was severely dehydrated, malnourished, and showing signs of extreme exhaustion. They wanted to keep her for at least a few days to make sure there was no permanent damage from the ordeal she had been through. I called my sister Emma, who lived in California and who I had not wanted to worry until I knew what was happening. She answered on the first ring. "Daniel, hey, what is up?" "Emma, I need to tell you something about Mom and Dad. You should probably sit down." I explained everything. The missing phone calls, the destroyed house, finding our father in the closet and our mother on the verge of collapse, the dementia diagnosis that they had hidden from both of us for a year. Emma cried. Then she got angry. Then she cried some more. How could they not tell us? How could Mom try to handle this alone? We could have helped. We could have done something. I know, but I think Dad was ashamed, and Mom was trying to respect his wishes while also keeping him safe. She was caught between what he wanted and what he needed, and she chose his dignity over asking for help. I am not saying it was the right choice, but I understand why she made it. I am catching a flight tomorrow morning. I will be there by afternoon. That first night, I slept in the hospital waiting room, not because they needed me there, but because I could not bring myself to leave. Could not stop thinking about my father hiding in that closet, my mother slowly breaking under the burden of trying to care for him alone. Over the next few days, as my parents both stabilized, the full picture of what had been happening emerged. My father's Alzheimer's had indeed been progressing faster than the doctors initially predicted. The medications they had tried had caused paradoxical reactions, making him more agitated rather than calmer. My mother had been so focused on keeping him at home and maintaining their independence that she had not recognized how quickly the situation was deteriorating. The doctors explained that early-onset Alzheimer's can be particularly aggressive, and that some patients do have severe behavioral symptoms that make home care extremely difficult without significant support. My father would need to be in a memory care facility where trained professionals could manage his care 24 hours a day. My mother cried when they told her this, but I think part of her was also relieved. Relieved that the impossible burden she had been carrying was finally being lifted. Relieved that she could stop pretending everything was manageable when it clearly was not. Emma arrived and we spent hours talking to doctors, social workers, and administrators at various memory care facilities in the area. We wanted to find a place that would treat our father with dignity, where he would have activities and social interaction and not just be sedated and forgotten in a room somewhere. The search was heartbreaking. We visited 5 different facilities, and each one depressed me more than the last. Some were clean but institutional, with fluorescent lights and linoleum floors that echoed when you walked. Others tried too hard to be cheerful, with bright colors and children's artwork on the walls that felt condescending to the elderly residents. Many were understaffed, with overworked nurses rushing between patients, unable to give anyone the attention they deserved. At one facility, we watched a resident wander the halls calling for someone named Margaret, and nobody stopped to help him. At another, we saw patients strapped into wheelchairs parked in front of a television showing a game show, none of them watching, all of them staring at nothing with empty eyes. "I cannot put Dad in a place like this," Emma said after we left the 3rd facility. "I cannot. These places are where people go to be warehoused until they die." "Not all of them are like that," I said, though I was not sure I believed it. "There have to be good facilities out there. We just have to keep looking." We found a place called Meadowbrook Memory Care about 30 minutes from Silverton. It was expensive, but it was clean and well-staffed, and the administrator, a woman named Patricia, seemed genuinely passionate about providing good care for dementia patients. Patricia gave us a tour that felt different from the others. She knew every patient by name. She stopped to talk to them, to listen to their rambling stories, to adjust a blanket or pour a glass of water without being asked. The staff we saw looked tired but engaged, like they actually cared about the people they were caring for. "We understand that memory loss is not just a medical condition," Patricia said as we walked through the common areas. "It is a human experience that affects the entire family. Our goal is to help patients maintain as much quality of life and dignity as possible while keeping them safe and comfortable. We do not believe in overmedication or restraints unless absolutely necessary. We believe in activities, social interaction, music therapy, anything that can reach the person inside the disease." She showed us the rooms, which were small but personal. Residents could bring furniture and photos and belongings from home. The common areas had puzzles and books and comfortable chairs. There was a garden where residents could walk safely, enclosed but not feeling like a prison. "Can we meet some of the residents?" Emma asked. Patricia smiled. "Of course, but I should prepare you. Most of our residents are in advanced stages of dementia. They may not be able to hold conversations or interact in ways that seem normal. But that does not mean they are not people who deserve respect and care." She introduced us to several residents. Martha, who thought Patricia was her daughter and kept thanking her for coming to visit. Robert, who could not speak anymore but smiled when Patricia put on his favorite Sinatra song. Louise, who was having a good day and told us a lucid story about her husband who had been dead for 15 years. It was sad. All of it was unbearably sad. But it also felt human. These residents were not being warehoused. They were being cared for. "This is the one," my mother said quietly after the tour. This is where he needs to be. My father was transferred there 2 weeks after I found him in that closet. By then, the medications had been adjusted and he was having fewer acute episodes, though he still had very little recognition of anyone around him. Sometimes he would look at my mother and smile, a flicker of recognition crossing his face, and she would hold his hand and tell him she loved him. Then the moment would pass and he would look confused again, not knowing who this woman was or why she was crying. The day we moved him into Meadowbrook was one of the hardest days of my life. We brought him in a wheelchair because he was still weak from his ordeal and the medications made him unsteady on his feet. He kept looking around with wide, frightened eyes, not understanding where we were taking him or why. "It is okay, Dad," I kept saying, even though I knew he did not understand me. "We are taking you somewhere safe. Somewhere people can help you." We had set up his room the day before with some of his favorite things from home. His reading chair, photos of our family from happier times, the quilt his mother had made him years ago. We were trying to create something familiar, something that might comfort him even if he could not articulate why. But when we wheeled him into the room, he just looked around blankly, no recognition in his eyes at all. The chair that he had sat in every evening for decades meant nothing to him. The photos of his children and grandchildren were just images of strangers. Even the quilt, which had been on his bed for 40 years, was just a piece of fabric. My mother helped settle him into the chair, arranging the quilt over his lap, talking to him in that gentle voice she had developed for managing his confusion. "There you go, sweetheart. Nice and comfortable. Look at your chair. Remember how much you loved reading in this chair." He did not respond, just sat there staring at nothing while his wife fought back tears and tried to make this nightmare situation feel like anything other than what it was. The final separation of a couple who had spent 41 years building a life together. Patricia came in to check on us and found my mother kneeling beside my father's chair, holding his hand, crying silently. She did not try to rush us or make it easier or pretend this was anything other than devastating. "Take all the time you need," she said quietly. "There is no right way to do this." We stayed for 3 hours that first day. My mother talked to my father about their life together, about memories he could not access anymore, about love he could not remember feeling. Emma and I sat nearby, sometimes adding our own memories, sometimes just being present in the grief. When it was finally time to leave, my mother kissed his forehead and told him she would be back tomorrow. He looked at her with confusion, not understanding who she was or why the stranger was kissing him. We walked out of Meadowbrook together, the 3 of us, and stood in the parking lot while my mother finally allowed herself to completely fall apart. She sobbed in a way I had never heard before, a sound of such pure anguish that it felt like her heart was breaking audibly. "I left him there," she kept saying. "I left him alone with strangers. He does not understand why. He thinks I abandoned him. He does not understand anything right now, Mom," I said, holding her while she cried. "But this is what he needs. This is how we keep him safe." Safe from what? The disease is inside him. There is no safety. There is just waiting for him to disappear completely while we pretend that keeping his body comfortable makes any of this okay. She was right and we all knew it. There was no making this okay. There was just surviving it. The hardest part was cleaning out their house. Emma and I did it together, neither of us wanting our mother to have to face the destruction of what had happened during that final week. We repaired the walls, replaced broken furniture, cleaned the carpets, threw away things that could not be salvaged. In my father's office, we found notebooks where he had been trying to track his symptoms in the early stages. Lists of words he had trouble remembering. Notes about moments when he could not figure out how to work the coffee maker or where he put his keys. Desperate attempts to document his own decline before he lost the ability to understand that it was happening. The notebooks were devastating to read. They started out organized and methodical, like the engineer he had been his whole life. Careful documentation of symptoms and dates, tracking patterns, trying to understand what was happening to his mind. January 15th. Could not remember the word for scissors today. Kept calling them the cutting things. Felt like an idiot. Sarah pretended not to notice. January 23rd. Got lost driving home from the grocery store. Have driven that route 1,000 times. Ended up 2 towns over before I figured out where I was. Did not tell Sarah. She would worry. February 4th. Forgot Emma's birthday. Did not even realize it until Sarah reminded me 3 days later. I have never forgotten my daughter's birthday. Not once in 30 years. What is happening to me? But as the months progressed, the entries became more fragmented, more desperate, the handwriting deteriorating into something barely legible. March something, cannot remember what month. Days blur together. Tried to make coffee. Could not remember how the machine works. Stood in kitchen for 20 minutes staring at it. Sarah found me crying. She made the coffee. She did not say anything, but I saw the fear in her eyes. April? Bad day. Could not remember who Sarah was this morning. She was standing in the kitchen and I asked her what she was doing in my house. The look on her face. The hurt. I remembered a few minutes later, but the damage was done. How do I apologize for forgetting my own wife? And then, most heartbreakingly, I do not want to forget Sarah. He had written in one entry dated about 8 months ago, the handwriting still mostly steady. I do not want to look at her someday and not know that she is the woman I have loved for 40 years. I do not want to forget my children or my life or everything that makes me who I am. This disease is stealing me piece by piece, and there is nothing I can do to stop it. I can feel myself disappearing. Every day, more of me is gone. Soon there will be nothing left but a body that looks like mine but has none of me inside it. And Sarah will have to watch it happen. My beautiful Sarah, who deserves so much better than this. Reading those words broke something in me. My father, who I had always seen as strong and capable and in control, had been terrified. Had been watching himself disappear and trying to hold onto his identity for as long as possible. And he had been so ashamed of what was happening that he could not tell his own children. I showed the notebook to my mother when she was released from the hospital. She read through it with tears streaming down her face, touching the pages like they were precious artifacts from a lost civilization. He made me promise, she said quietly, not to tell you or Emma, not to let anyone know until it got so bad we had no choice. He said he would rather die with his dignity intact than live with everyone knowing he could not remember his own name. But hiding it did not preserve his dignity, Mom. It just meant you both suffered alone. I know that now, but when someone you love begs you to keep their secret, when they look at you with such fear and desperation in their eyes, it is hard to break that promise even when you know it is the right thing to do. My mother moved into a small apartment near Meadowbrook so she could visit my father every day. She never blamed him for any of what happened, never expressed anger at the situation they found themselves in. She just showed up every day, sat with him, talked to him even when he did not respond, held his hand and told him stories about their life together. Sometimes he seemed to listen. Sometimes he would smile at her voice even if he did not understand the words. Sometimes he would squeeze her hand and she would choose to believe it meant he still knew who she was. Emma and I visited as often as we could. We would sit with them both, talking about nothing important, just filling the space with family presence. Sometimes our father would look at us with curiosity, like we were interesting strangers. Sometimes he would get agitated and the staff would suggest we leave for a while. Sometimes he would be calm and we could sit together in comfortable silence. The father I had known, the mechanical engineer who built me a treehouse when I was 7 and taught me how to change a tire when I was 16 and gave me advice about career choices when I graduated college, was gone. What remained was someone else. Someone lost in their own mind. Someone who needed care and kindness but could not give much back. It was unbearably sad. But it was also, in its own way, a kind of lesson in love. Because my mother showed up every single day, even when my father did not recognize her. She sat with him and talked to him and held his hand, not because she would get anything back from it, but because that is what love means when everything else is stripped away. One afternoon, about 6 months after we found them, I was visiting alone. My mother had gone to a doctor's appointment and asked me to sit with my father for a few hours. He was having a good day, relatively calm and content, sitting in his room and looking out the window at the garden. The staff at Meadowbrook had told us that he had been improving slightly on the new medication regimen. Still confused most of the time, still not recognizing anyone consistently, but less agitated. More at peace with the world he could not quite understand. I sat beside him in silence for a while, just being present the way we all had learned to do. Not expecting conversation or recognition, just offering companionship to a man who no longer knew he needed it. The room was quiet except for the distant sounds of the facility. Someone laughing down the hall, a television playing somewhere, the gentle sounds of people living out their final chapters in whatever peace they could find. I wish you had told me, Dad, about the Alzheimer's. I wish you had trusted me enough to let me help. I know you were scared and ashamed, but you were not alone. You never had to be alone in this. I did not expect a response. I had said similar things before, had talked to him about everything from my work to the weather to my feelings about what had happened, and he never reacted. He would just sit there, sometimes peaceful, sometimes agitated, but never really present in the way that suggested he understood what I was saying. But this time something was different. My father turned his head slowly and looked at me, really looked at me, his eyes focusing in a way they usually did not. And for just a moment, just a brief flickering moment, I saw recognition there. I saw my father, the real him, looking out through eyes that had been empty for so long. "Daniel," he said clearly. My name. The first time he had said my name in months. His voice was rough and uncertain, like he was remembering how to use it, but it was unmistakably him. "Yeah, Dad, it is me." He kept looking at me, and I could see him struggling to hold on to whatever thread of consciousness had brought him back to himself. His hand reached out slowly and found mine, gripping it with surprising strength. "I am sorry." The words were soft but distinct, each one an effort. "I am sorry I was not stronger. Sorry I made you both carry this. Sorry I was too proud to let you help when I still could have asked for it." Tears were streaming down my face now, but I did not wipe them away. I did not want to break the connection, did not want to do anything that might end this precious moment of having my father back, even if only for a few seconds. "You do not have to be sorry. You do not have to be strong. You just have to let us love you. That is all. Just let us love you." He smiled then, just a little, and squeezed my hand. His eyes were wet with tears too, and I realized he understood. In this moment, he understood everything. The disease, the burden he had placed on my mother, the year of secrets and shame, all of it. "Love you, son," he whispered. "Always loved you, even when I forget, even when I do not know your name. Love is still there, somewhere." "I know, Dad. I love you too." We sat like that for maybe 3 more minutes, his hand in mine, both of us crying quietly, both of us holding on to this gift of connection that we knew could not last. And then I saw it happen. Saw the moment when the thread broke, when whatever spark of consciousness had returned began to fade again. The focus left his eyes. His grip on my hand loosened. He looked at me with confusion. like he was trying to remember who I was but could not quite grasp it. Then the moment passed completely, the recognition faded from his eyes, and he went back to staring out the window at the garden he would not remember seeing 5 minutes from now. But I held on to that moment, that brief instance of connection, that apology that I do not think he owed but that clearly mattered to him to express. It was not enough, could never be enough, but it was something. A year after I found them, my father passed away from complications related to his Alzheimer's. By the end, he had stopped eating, stopped responding to any stimulation, just lay in his bed staring at nothing while his body slowly shut down. My mother was with him when he died, holding his hand, telling him it was okay to let go. At his funeral, Emma and I both spoke about the father we remembered. The man he had been before the disease took him, the engineer who loved building things, the husband who adored his wife, the father who taught us how to be good people even if he could not teach us how to ask for help when we needed it. I stood at the podium looking out at the small gathering of people who had come to remember Michael Cooper, and I struggled to find words that could capture the complexity of what we had been through. My father was a proud man. I began, my voice shaking. Too proud, maybe. Proud enough that when he started to forget things, when he realized something was wrong with his mind, he chose to hide it rather than ask for help. He chose dignity over honesty, privacy over support, and that choice cost him dearly. I saw some people in the audience shift uncomfortably. This was not the kind of eulogy they were expecting. They wanted comforting stories and gentle memories, not uncomfortable truths about pride and shame and the consequences of silence. But I do not tell you this to criticize my father. I tell you this because I think he would want me to. I think if he could have one last message for everyone here, it would be this: do not let pride kill you. Do not let shame prevent you from asking for help. Do not hide your struggles until they become crises that destroy not just you, but everyone who loves you. My voice broke, and I had to pause to collect myself. Emma was crying in the front row, and my mother was holding her hand, both of them destroyed by grief but also by the truth I was speaking. My father died from Alzheimer's disease, but he also died from shame, from the belief that admitting weakness was worse than suffering in silence. And I wish, more than anything, that he had trusted us enough to be weak with us, to let us see him struggling, and to let us help carry the burden before it crushed my mother and nearly killed them both. I looked directly at my mother then. Mom, I know you think you failed him, but you did not. You loved him with everything you had. You fought for him longer than anyone could have expected. And what happened was not your fault. It was the fault of a disease that has no cure and a society that makes people ashamed to admit they are not okay. My mother spoke too, though she could barely get through it. She talked about their 41 years of marriage, about the life they had built together, about watching him slowly disappear and loving him anyway, about the impossible choice between honoring his wishes for privacy and getting him the help he needed. I do not know if I made the right choices, she said, her voice breaking on every word. I tried to respect his dignity while also keeping him safe, and I do not think I succeeded at either. But I loved him. Every day, even the hardest days, I loved him. And I hope that somewhere, somehow, he knew that. I hope that in those moments when he would look at me and smile, even if he did not know my name, some part of him remembered being loved. After the funeral, I took a week off work and stayed with my mother in her apartment. We sorted through old photos and talked about memories and cried when we needed to cry. One evening, as we were looking through a box of my father's things from his office at Meadowbrook, we found one final notebook that he must have been keeping in the very early stages of his diagnosis. Inside, in his handwriting that was still mostly steady at that point, he had written something addressed to my mother. Sarah, if you are reading this, it means I have forgotten how to tell you all the things you need to hear. So I am writing them now while I still can. I love you more than I have ever been able to express. You are the best decision I ever made, the greatest gift of my life. Every day with you, even the ordinary days, has been a blessing. I am sorry for what is happening to me. I am sorry for what it will put you through. I am sorry that you will have to watch me disappear, and there is nothing either of us can do to stop it. But do not let me become a burden that crushes you. When it gets too hard, when you cannot manage anymore, it is okay to get help. It is okay to put me in a facility if that is what I need. It is okay to choose your own well-being over my pride. I know I will probably ask you to hide this from everyone. That is the shame and fear talking. Do not listen to that voice. Tell our children. Tell our friends. Let people help you. Do not try to carry this alone the way I know you will be tempted to. You have always been stronger than me, braver than me, better than me, but even you have limits. Remember that. Please remember that. All my love. For as long as I can remember what love means. Michael. My mother held that letter and sobbed, and I sat beside her with my arm around her shoulders, and we grieved together for the man he had been and for the suffering they had both endured and for all the help they could have had if shame and fear had not kept them silent. He told me not to carry it alone, my mother said through her tears. He literally wrote it down, told me to ask for help, and I did not. I thought I was respecting his wishes, but I was ignoring the most important thing he asked me to do. You were doing the best you could in an impossible situation, I told her. Nobody has a manual for this. Nobody knows the right answers. But maybe if I had asked for help sooner, he would not have had that final episode. Maybe we could have gotten his medications adjusted before he got so bad. Maybe those last few weeks could have been different. Or maybe not. Maybe it would have happened the same way no matter what. You cannot torture yourself with maybes. That has been 3 years ago now. My mother is still living in her apartment near the memory care facility, even though she does not have a reason to be there anymore. She has built a life in Silverton, has friends and routines and a garden that she tends with the same devotion she once gave to caring for my father. Emma and I visit her often, and we have learned to be more present, more attentive, more willing to ask the hard questions instead of accepting surface-level reassurances that everything is fine. We have learned that sometimes the people we love need help even when they insist they do not. That independence can become a cage when it prevents people from accessing the support they need. I think about that day I found them a lot, about opening that closet and seeing my father crouched there, lost in his own mind, about my mother sitting on that floor, broken from trying to carry an impossible burden alone, about all the warning signs I must have missed because I was not looking carefully enough. And I think about how many other families are going through something similar right now. How many people are hiding diagnoses out of shame or fear. How many caregivers are slowly being crushed under the weight of providing care they are not equipped to provide alone. How many children are missing the signs that their parents need help because everyone has gotten so good at pretending everything is fine. Dementia is not like other illnesses. It does not just affect the person who has it. It slowly erodes everyone around them, forcing families to watch someone they love disappear piece by piece while their body remains. And the shame attached to cognitive decline means that many people hide it until the situation becomes catastrophic, until they have gone from manageable with support to crisis that requires intervention. If I could go back, I would ask more questions. I would visit more often. I would not accept my mother's assurances that everything was fine when my gut was telling me something was off. I would push harder for the truth even when it was uncomfortable. But I cannot go back. None of us can. All we can do is learn from what happened and try to be better at recognizing when people need help, even when they insist they are okay. My mother has forgiven herself, mostly. She volunteers now at Meadowbrook, sitting with other dementia patients who do not get many visitors, providing the kind of patient companionship she gave my father. She says it helps her feel like something good came from what they went through, that maybe their suffering can make someone else's journey a little bit easier. And she talks about it now, openly. She tells people about my father's Alzheimer's and about the mistakes she made in trying to care for him alone. She encourages other families to ask for help early, to not let shame prevent them from accessing the resources that exist. Your father would be proud of that, I told her once, that you are using what happened to help other people. I do not know about proud, she said, but maybe he would understand why I am doing it, why I need to talk about it instead of hiding it the way we did when he was alive. Sometimes I think about that letter he wrote her, telling her not to carry the burden alone. And I wonder if somehow, in those last few seconds of clarity when he said my name and apologized, he understood that the shame that kept them silent had been the real enemy. Not the disease itself, but the fear of admitting vulnerability that prevented them from getting help until it was almost too late. That is what I want people to understand from my family's story. That asking for help is not weakness. That admitting you cannot handle something alone is not failure. That sometimes the most dignified thing you can do is accept that you need support, even when every instinct tells you to hide and pretend everything is manageable. I found my father in a closet, hiding from a world he could not understand anymore, while my mother tried to protect him from a disease that could not be fought with willpower alone. And in that terrible moment, I learned that love is not always enough, that good intentions are not always enough, that sometimes you need more than devotion and determination. Sometimes you need help, and there is no shame in that. If your parents are aging, call them, visit them, ask them hard questions, and do not accept easy answers. Look for the signs that something is wrong even when they insist everything is fine. And if they need help, help them get it, even if they resist, even if they say they do not need it. Because the alternative is finding them 8 days later, destroyed by a secret they were too ashamed to share, broken by a burden they tried to carry alone. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Before you go, I have left 2 more stories here on your screen. Both from men who discovered that family is not always who you are born to, it is who stands by you when the truth comes out. Click on whichever one calls to you. And if you want to join our community of people who understand what it is like to be the outsider looking in, that notification bell is your invitation. Until tomorrow, remember, your story matters even if they tried to erase it.